Good day and welcome back to our series on filters in Tableau. So, well done. We've reached the end of the series. So, hopefully you have been able to follow all of them along. If you haven't, go back and have a look. It's jam-packed with a lot of information. And we are at the last topic now. We're looking at cascading filters, and we'll also touch on the order of operations. So let's have a quick look at what we've covered thus far before we move on to the next topic. We have had a look at what a filter is, as well as the different classes, looking at global filters with specific focus on extract filter and data source filters, and then stepping into accessible filters, covering context filters, dimension filters, measures, and date filters. Before we move on to this topic, let's have a look at the data which we are using. The data which we are looking at, as mentioned, is from the Kaggle website, and it's a CSV file, which is also available, obviously, from our site, and you'll find the link in the comment section. This is basically one CSV file with about 24,000 lines and a few columns. What you will notice in here as well is it ranges from the time that Kickstarter was brought to life, back in April 2009 until January 2018 is the most recent data we have in there. Now let's just run through each of the fields to understand what each of them are used for, as we'll obviously be using this in our filtering as well. So firstly, we have the ID field, which is a unique identifier with the name of the project. We also have a category as well as a main category in which this project is listed on the Kickstarter website. We have a country indicator. We'll notice that a lot of them are already from the US, being a US entity, but there are also a number of other countries in there. We have a date that the project was launched on Kickstarter, so when we are starting to look for backers. We also have a deadline at the time that the project closes, the currency that the amounts are in. So we've got a goal and a pledged amount. So obviously goal is the amount or the target that needs to be reached for this project to be continuing, and the pledged amount as well, which has already at this point in time when this extract was made, is the amount which has been received for this project or pledged as such. Then we also have a state with indicating the state of the project. It's not state as in geographical references, but more on the state. So we can see some of the project failed, some have been successful, others are still live. And next we've got total number of backers thus far, also the goal and the pledged in USD amount, as we do have some in the local currency for these entities. And that's in essence the file which we'll take forward to the next section. Now that we know how all of these filters work, how to use each of them, let's see if we start combining them. What does that mean? Now this is where the order of operation is quite important, and Tableau has given us a specific guideline on how these are performed, so that we do know what is the best approach in applying them or using them to make sure our data is complete, but also to improve the performance. So Tableau uses called a query pipeline, which is basically the order in which these filters are being applied. And we can start off by the extract filter, which is the one that we use with the legacy filter. That is directly into the data file that we are connecting. And when we apply that, once that's applied, then only the data source filter is applied on the results of the extract filter. And both of those are our global filters, and those are also the ones then which is applicable to the whole worksheet. After that, Tableau will execute the context filter, which, as you remember, is on the sheet level, and that would be done first before any of the dimension filters or measure filters are done as well. However, after the context filter is done or executed, the next level is a level of detail function. Now, we won't go into too much detail on this. Do have a look at the videos that we've got on the topic of level of detail calculations, but just a good note to know that that is the next level which is being filtered on after the context filter. Only after the first level of detail calculation, then your dimension filters are executed. And as mentioned previously, each of them are on each of these levels, I might add as well. But on this dimension level, for instance, all of them are independently executed, and the results then combined. So quite resource intensive per each of these levels. Then we've got the include and exclude level of detail function, once again before we get into the measures, and then the measure calculations. So quite interesting enough, your dimension filters will always be done before your measure filter. And then lastly, our table calculations will be executed on the remaining information that's in our sheet after all of these have been applied. So good to keep this in mind when you develop your model, especially when you start using level of detail calculations or table calculations as such. It might make quite an impact on your performance and on your results at the end of the day. But let's have a look at cascading filters. So what are cascading filters? What is the problem? Why are we even looking at this? So for that case, I'm going to open up Tableau and we'll look at a different file. Let's look at the Superstore example that Tableau has provided us. So as you can see over here, there's a lot of information in there. We'll just be focusing on a couple of things. But this is, in fact, order details for customers within the whole of the US. So we've got location information, we've got the order information, the information around the customer, a profit. We look at discounts, profit ratios, quantities, and so forth. But we will just be focusing on the location, so from a geographical perspective. And why we do that, for instance, is if we build a simple, let's say quite a simple category view of the total sales, for instance, and we can actually make this on the subcategory level, not the category level. And as they are in a hierarchy, we don't have to drag it down. We can just do it like this and add it as a bar chart, and let's have the category in color. All right, so that's a very simple, straightforward, and I'll put the legend there, straightforward visualization. But let's say we want to provide our user the ability to make this interactive, as we mentioned earlier, and have them select specific items, which is focused on the location. So in this case, what we'll do is what we know from earlier videos is that if we use the only relevant values, we can limit what is displayed. So if we first start off with region, because region is the most upper level limit, and we say show the filter, we've got the 4 regions of the US, and we can include also the state into this as another filter. I'll just swap these around because I prefer to have the state at the bottom, seeing as they are sort of a hierarchy, and we will use a single value list for that. So if you can see, now that we click it, it automatically updates the bottom. And Tableau was clever enough here to see that this is part of hierarchy and it selected only values in the database. Sometimes you might have, over there, and only values in database. Let's just change that back like this. So in this case, you'll see that it doesn't matter which region we tick, it would still have all of the states, which is a long list. And sometimes some of them might be having an effect on our sheet, other times not. So if we do select the only relevant values, it only shows the states in which we are interested in. So then let's have a look. Let's stay on the western side of the region, and we can look at all of these different states. So that's pretty straightforward. But let's say we now need to include the city into this view. We want to add it to link a third filter onto this and still make it nice and user-friendly. Now it might become a little bit of a problem, seeing as if we add in city, if we add in city as a filter, and we just select all of them, and we show the filter, there we go. Let's actually show it next to the other two. If we, for instance, look only at Oregon as the state of our choice, it displays the cities in Oregon. So if I do untick Springfield, for instance, you would note that it also filters the state, because the state is dependent on our selection in city. That's what we've mentioned here with relevant states. So how to get around that is to change it up a little bit. So firstly, we need to make the top level a context filter. and then the state that's dependent on that, we need to say that it only shows all values in the context. So basically on that level, and then we show it down, then we select only relevant values. So now any change in here will have no effect on the state, seeing as that is looking at what's available from the context. So changing the context obviously would change the state. So choosing Delaware, it would show us the cities within Delaware. So again, no changes made from the city to there. So that's how you add a third dimension to your cascading filters. Now you might think, how do we add a fourth? So if we wanted to add the postal code in as well, and maybe we'll just change the city to that. There we go. And we put the postal code as a filter as well. And we put we change that to there. And we say, if we are looking at a specific state, in this case, let's look at West. Let's look at California, for instance. We know there's a lot of information around California, and we focus on Los Angeles. So then we will end up having the postal codes for Los Angeles. However, if we do start making changes to the postal codes, again, there might be an update backwards, seeing as city is focused on all relevant values. So in this case, if we had all values in the database listed here, any changes in here will be updating our city. Now, how do we get around that? So another tip is we can now add state also to the context, which we then say that this is not obviously from a context, because context filters there are two now, that we say it's only relevant values, seeing as that it's only the relevant values that are remaining on this level, because we spoke earlier about the operations that are done, and at each level you can then use the specific relevant values. So any changes here now gets updated or updates state, but no changes here updates region. And then our city needs to be defined and say that we are looking at all values in the context. So city is determined then on these two. So any changes in here, if we select all, or if we just select California, for instance, we will be updating the city based on that. And then lastly, our postal codes are then using all the relevant values. So whatever is left. So if we do update this would be updated properly with our actual, let's just looking for Los Angeles. If we select Los Angeles, it will update the postal code properly, but no changes here would be updating any of the higher level items. Yeah. Okay, so if we select all postal codes in there and say, okay, let's want to add in the customer name now as well. So how will we do that? We already have two in the context filter. Adding another will not work like that, because then we'll be updating the two that's got only relevant filters. So in this case, we can use something like the table calculations. Now, you remember from our list of operations that is something which is calculated last. So why not make use of it? And how we do that? Let's say we want to add customer names in there. Let's quickly add the calculated field. We will use the lookup. So let's first call this customer, and we will use the lookup function, where we say let's show the minimum of the customer names and use an offset of 0 and apply that, and that becomes our next filter. So if we drag this into our filter, let's do it like that. We can just say all, and we show this filter. It would show all of the names that belong to that specific city. So if you can see in Long Beach, we only have one postal code, and our customer, these are our customers in that region. In Lodi, same idea. So quite helpful. And if we just say Los Angeles over there, quite helpful. If we now filter on the postal codes, we can see the list changes over here. However, if we make any changes to this, nothing happens to the postal codes. So super helpful, and that's how you can basically make your lists very nice and user friendly for your users. You'll see if we select central, it only updates state. We can select a state, we can select a city, the postal codes, and the customers would be shown. By the way, we can also just update the title of this to make it look a little bit better and just call this customers. And that is how you add 5 levels of cascading filters. Alright, I hope you found that helpful, and I hope you found this series helpful. This is our final installment of our series on filters. It's been a great journey for me to share with you. It's been a long one, but I'm sure there was plenty to take away from here. And I do encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel for further exciting series and charts coming up. Thank you for joining, and until we meet again.